Hello listeners, Mark here with our first SLP short for a while, and this one is part interview, part call to action. I'll be chatting to Kevin Rye from Think Fan Engagement. What I'll do is I'll let Kevin tell you what his company are, what they do. We've got Kevin on after his piece for our friends at Love Rugby League, brought Think Fan Engagement's Rugby League Fans Survey to our attention recently. And the call to action is going to be for you guys to all go and fill in the survey to help Kevin on the journey of helping make sure fans in our great sport are listened to. So I'll take it away with Kev. So hello Kevin, welcome to the Super League pod.
Thank you very much, Mark. Nice to be here.
Yeah, and I'm sure lots of people will have heard of the concept of fan engagement, and that's what we've got you on to talk about. So what, probably the easiest, most obvious and most difficult question, what is fan engagement and why do you think it's so important?
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll start off very quickly with something about what fan engagement is not. Well, it's a bit more complicated than that, I suppose. Look, basically fan engagement for years has been very front end. It's all been about get this, and it's a lot of it's been about what goes on in the sports industry, and particularly my background in football. But I think this applies to rugby league as well and other sports. And it's all about get this app, solve your fan engagement problems. Do this bit of data crunching, and you'll have no problem with your fan engagement. And actually, what fan engagement is it's part of what the industry calls, what the public relations industry would call stakeholder engagement. So there are people who have an interest in an organisation that is far greater than simply something they buy. You know, they're not just a customer, right?
Yeah.
And when it comes to fan engagement, well, it's a subset of that. It makes total sense. You know, you're engaging with fans, and engagement. The problem with engagement is it's come to mean so many different things, and quite a lot of it is tech related. It's to do with, you know, the number of tweets that people,
social media interactions, that sort of stuff. That's
right. Yeah. And when you talk to someone about what engagement even means at that level, it's not about. There's nothing that talks about the relationship, right? Because the reason we tweet, the reason we buy something, the reason we engage at any sense with our clubs and originally this obviously came from my experience in football, but this applies again to league. I'm going to talk specifically about league in this one. Is very, 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 very often, almost always, to do with the fact that we've got a deep relationship with these organisations, with these clubs. And I know there's a lot, you know, can be geographical, and I think, you know, that applies a lot to league. I think there should be a great sense of pride in the geographical uniqueness of the sport, almost uniqueness. But how specific it is that it covers that area of the country. I think that's fantastic. I love that. I love that whole thing. And you don't fall in love with these things because of a success on the pitch. You know, you might have periods like Wigan did, you know, your own club, where you're romping through championships every season. You know, most of the time that isn't going to be the case. And, you know, during the lean times, you're still following. Why are you doing that? That doesn't make any sense. Not because you're getting anything back that's, you know, you're not getting a great service in return. Very often the service you're getting is crap. Let's be honest, because that's the nature of sport. You're going to lose. You're going to get relegated. So engagement's about recognising that relationship and recognising that the reason we stick to these organisations is not because of the price point or because we have excellent, you know, an excellent engagement rate, or because the you know, on social, or because the burgers are nice. You know, some of those things can affect the way we feel at that moment about stuff, but, you know, the relationship's deeper. So it's about that, and it's about recognizing that in how you run the organization, the club, and how I think also how the sport gets run too. Because I think, you know, in something like rugby league, for me, I look at it and think there's a lot being done to that sport, which actually is also being done to the fans. So yeah, it's about that special relationship between you and your club, really.
So it's recognising then that a fan is more than just a customer or a consumer. There's a more detailed relationship and more sort of in-depth relationship there. The connections are stronger and tighter than just if it
That's
was
Yes.
so somewhere between family and consumer.
Can I just say, Mark, you put it better than I did. Go on.
So obviously that kind of hints at why you think it's so important there. It's because it's making that relationship stay strong. So where do you come into this then at Think Fan Engagement?
Well, I mean, the beginning of my journey in all of this was that I'm a fan of AFC Wimbledon as we are now, Wimbledon Football Club as we were coming through the divisions in football, and I was one of the people that tried to stop our club being franchised, which is a term that is not unfamiliar to some people following rugby league, and we reformed. We restarted the club from the very bottom of the English senior football pyramid, and I was a little bit involved in that. Just returned to being a fan, and I ended up working for Supporters Direct a couple of years after all that finished, and it got me exposed to how clubs worked. And actually, we did work in rugby league for a bit. I didn't really get involved in that very much. My colleague, the sadly missed Jackie Forster, was involved in that. And it became obvious to me that there was a real gap, and that actually the stuff that I did at Supporters Direct wasn't all of it, and that there were lots of things that I could do with clubs. And so what I look at now, and what Think Fan Engagement looks at, is trying to quantify that, trying to understand the relationship, trying to measure it. The Fan Engagement Index in English football has been very successful in that. Sharing good practice amongst people who are working in it, and trying to also understand how fans think about it, so that people can understand that, look, this relationship is distinct and unique. So, a lot of it is we measure things, we scrutinize things, we try to understand fans and clubs and build that relationship better and make it more, more understanding between the two. And also, to be honest as well, building some understanding on the part of fans towards their clubs, because I think, understandably, a lot of fans don't always understand how clubs actually work. But then also, I think, a responsibility the other way in explaining it better and involving them.
And I guess helping the clubs and the sports governing bodies build on that relationship, so that communication can be more two-way and people are talking the same language as each other rather than not being open with each other, I guess. Yeah,
should be more two-way rather than could. It has to be, because that's how those organisations work, because we're not customers. We are customers sometimes, but that's not the reason we're there. It's a very perverse form of customer.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying with that. So why your background's in football? You've done most of your work through football, through a personal thing that's then built up. So why rugby league has grabbed your attention now?
Well, as I said, I had a little bit of exposure to the sport when I was working for Supporters Direct, and we had SD Rugby League. But as far as I could ever have a second favourite sport, which I don't, if I be, I'll be completely honest with you, I don't really. I'm not really a sports fan in that sense. I'm a football, I love my football club, absolutely, go to the ends of the earth for it. But I did actually watch Fulham, now London Broncos, obviously, and now they're coming to share at the.
You can be that rallying call to get somewhere anywhere near to even 10% of that 9,000 capacity.
So league is a sport I would say, out of all the sports, I understand better. And I think also, and I like what I do. I don't watch it. I don't watch a lot of sport or anything. But if I was ever to say what other sport would you watch, I like a bit of league sometimes. It's an exciting sport. And also the conversations, I had a conversation not that long ago, although I suppose it was last summer, with Carl Fitzpatrick at Warrington Wolves, who Ryan Sparks, who used to work at Featherstone, now works at Bradford City Football Club.
Yes,
put me in touch with, and I really liked talking to Carl, and I liked how he understood the difficult balancing act he's got on to try to make rugby league entertaining and unique in its place, because of where the competition he's got around him is all football, but also that he seemed to understand the rootedness of the sport and why that was important. And he really impressed me. And I looked at what league was doing and moreover what it wasn't doing and the mistakes it was making around things like marketing and rebranding and this obsession with all we need to do is repackage how we sell it. And I thought, well, look, why don't you ask the best people in the world about it? Ask them what they think, and be prepared to have a conversation. Be prepared to be told that you might be getting it wrong. I started having conversations with a few people who I know in the sport, and James Gordon at Love Rugby League, and I chatted with Martin Cheney, who used to be on the board. He was one of the first people I spoke to. Who used to be on the board of supporters direct and was involved in trying to make the rugby league work happen, which sad it didn't really last. And I just went,
there was some fan ownership in rugby league, wasn't there? But most of it's reverted back to private ownership at those clubs for the financial reasons of the North, I think, as much as anything.
Well, to be honest, look, it's not really just about ownership. It's about influence, and it's about listening to fans. Fan ownership can be a really important thing, and I think it's a superior model of ownership because I've benefited from that. But it's really hard in a game that doesn't have the protection for those sorts of models. But putting that aside, this is about influence and about listening, about clubs listening to their most important stakeholder, the people that mean that their club can be professional and pay players to play. And even if they can't, it's the ones that turn up every week, regardless of whether you're a summer or winter sport. I just went, you know what? I'm going to ask the questions. I want us to find out whether fans are happy with it. And so that was the reason that I then launched this survey, which I'll mention at the end, the Rugby League Supporters Survey, Fan Survey. And look, if it comes back and people say we're very happy, well, fine, then I'll tootle off and it'll all be good. But I don't think that's the case.
And I don't think that's the case either.
No, and the results I've seen so far tell me very strongly that there's a problem. And I think the problem is that fans don't feel listened to. They don't feel involved. There's a perfectly legitimate reason why they should be. Is absolutely central reason they should be. And I think the sport itself just has a look of slight panic about it a lot of the time. And I think if it can kind of just stop, think, reflect, start listening, correct these relationships a bit, I think things could improve. And as I said at the start, you look at the sport and I think it's a genuinely exciting sport. You've got so much and it's so rooted and so, it's got a sense of belonging. And a lot of organisations, a lot of sports don't have that, and they'd lost and adrift. And actually, I don't think it's much to bring. Having spoken to people like Carl and Ryan, I don't think it would take much to reconnect it and to get it to be more big, to realise what its roots are again and realise what strength it has.
Well, Rugby League has one of the most unique origin stories of any sport. Really, lots of sports will have had steps towards professionalism within their kind of history. Football has a very strong one, but rugby league is very, very specific, very clear line in the sand when it happened, and a history that you can live. You can go to the George Hotel. It's going to be the museum that celebrates the sport at some point when we're able to pull it off. So yeah, you're right. There is some obvious things there that people can connect back to with rugby league. So the survey's out. We'll put links to the survey up when we post this episode. So anyone listening now, look at our social media pages and you'll find links to the survey. What sort of stuff is the survey asking for? Because it's not a hard survey to complete. It's not hard hitting. It's very surface level stuff.
Yeah, no, it's basically asking fans, how they feel about the way they're the relationship, the engagement with their club, whether they do actually get opportunities to, other than the obvious questions about how many games you go to and stuff like that, which is important information. It's a lot of it is about whether or not clubs take the views of the person in the fans into account. When it comes to certain things like ticketing, fixture rescheduling, change to badge rebranding, things like that. And then just drilling down a little bit and asking, were you asked for your views if you were a fan whose club did rebrand? And whether or not as well, I've kind of asking whether